After Brandon and Rachel have snatched their second star piece right out from core extension, they were now in a toy factory where the worst kind of experiments happened.
Why did you have to send our friends to these abandoned places? We could have used their help. We probably could have stopped Darkaplear from ending the world.
Rachel muttered, flicking her flashlight beam across the broken conveyor belt. The factory floor stretched ahead, littered with disembodied doll limbs and cracked plastic faces grinning up from the shadows. Brandon had felt bad for sending Ash Curry to this cursed factory and letting her get turned into a possessed doll. The first time Brandon saw Ash back at that government facility beneath Disney World fingers twitch, those stitched, yarn-wrapped fingers, he vomited into a pile of sawdust. It wasn't the gore that did it. It was the way her button eyes, lopsided now, still held the same exasperated look she'd given him when he joked about the factory being probably fine. The smell of melted plastic and rusting metal coiled thick in the air as Brandon wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, his stomach still churning. Rachel didn't glance back at him. She was already stepping over the sprawled limbs of dismembered animatronics, her boots crunching on shattered porcelain faces.
Third star piece,
she said, voice low, like the factory itself might be listening.
Somewhere in this hellhole, and we're not leaving without it.
The crash came from somewhere above. A thunderous clatter of metal on metal that sent a shudder through the rusted catwalks overhead. Brandon barely had time to grab Rachel's arm before the moan followed, a sound like air escaping a corpse's lungs. Low and wet and wrong. It wasn't human. It wasn't even animal. It was the groan of something that had learned to mimic pain without ever feeling it. The thing wasn't just standing there, it pulsed, its matted blue fur rippling like something alive squirmed beneath the surface. Its mouth stretched wider, impossibly wide, a black void lined with jagged teeth that gleamed under the flickering factory lights. Rachel's grip on Brandon's arm turned vise-tight.
Don't blink,
she breathed.
Stay back, Huggy,
Rachel said, voice steady despite the way her fingers dug into Brandon's forearm. The creature's grin stretched wider, its stitched mouth twitching with something disturbingly like amusement. That was when Brandon saw it, the small, ragged form clinging to Huggy's back like a grotesque parody of a child riding piggyback. The Raggedy and doll's yarn hair was matted with something dark, its button eyes reflecting the flickering overhead lights in a way that made Brandon's stomach twist.
Look at what you did to me!
Ash Curry's voice hissed from the doll's stitched mouth, too deep, too wet, like something gargling through syrup and broken glass. The doll's head lolled to the side, revealing stitches where her neck had been crudely sewn back together. Brandon's breath caught. Those were his stitches, the same clumsy cross-stitches he'd used to fix Rachel's backpack last week. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut.
Now I'm going to help the prototype burn the world.
Ash crooned, and Huggy's body shuddered, his fur rippling as if something moved beneath it. Rachel's flashlight beam wavered as she took a step back, her boots scraping against the concrete. Brandon could feel the heat of her panic radiating through her grip. Huggy's body uncoiled like a spring-loaded nightmare, his elongated limbs snapping forward with a wet, meaty sound. Brandon barely had time to yank Rachel backward before the creature's claws gouged deep furrows into the concrete where they'd been standing.
Run!
Rachel screamed, but it was unnecessary. Brandon was already dragging her toward a shattered service door, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous hell of the factory.
That's right, Huggy!
Ash's voice shrieked from the doll's mangled throat, the words bubbling with something between laughter and a death rattle.
Tear them limb from limb!
The Raggedy and doll clung tighter to Huggy's back, her stitched fingers digging into his matted fur as if she were steering him. The animatronic lunged again, his jaw unhinging with a sickening pop, too wide, too many teeth, and Brandon felt hot breath on the back of his neck as they barely dodged another swipe. The floor gave way with a groan that sounded almost relieved, like the factory had been waiting years for this exact moment to collapse beneath them. Brandon's stomach lurched as gravity yanked him down, Rachel's scream shredding the air beside him. They hit something slick, not concrete, not metal, but a slope of something rubbery and wet that sent them skidding into darkness. The last thing Brandon saw before the shadows swallowed them whole was Ash's dollface peering over the edge, her stitched grin stretching impossibly wide as Huggy's claws flexed in anticipation.
I think we lost them.
Brandon gasped, his ribs burning as he pressed against the damp, curved wall of whatever chute they'd slid into. Rachel's flashlight flickered weakly in her shaking hands, casting jagged shadows across the tunnel's ribbed metal interior. A service shaft, maybe, or some kind of refuse, chute long since clogged with decades of forgotten stuffing and moldering plastic. Then the roar came. Not from above them, but from inside the tunnel, deeper in the blackness. It wasn't Huggy's wet, gurgling snarl. This was higher-pitched, a sound like fabric ripping under tension, threaded with something that vibrated wrong against Brandon's eardrums. Rachel's flashlight beam jerked forward just as the creature rounded a bend in the shaft. Yarnaby's body was a grotesque tapestry of unraveling threads and exposed stuffing, its limbs elongated like stretched taffy, each joint bulging with knots the size of fists. Its face, if it could be called that, was a lopsided patchwork of mismatched buttons, some sewn directly into the yarn flesh, others dangling by threads that dripped a thick, syrupy black fluid. The worst part was its mouth. A vertical slit running from where its chin should be all the way up between its button eyes, puckered with crude, overlapping stitches that split apart with a sound like Velcro tearing as it roared again. Rachel didn't hesitate. She swung the shotgun up in one fluid motion and fired 3 deafening rounds into Yarnaby's chest. The creature's yarn body absorbed the bullets with sickening squelches, the projectiles disappearing into its stuffing like stones dropped in tar. The buttons on its face rattled with what might have been laughter. Stitches stretching wider as it took another lurching step forward.
Damn it!
Damn it, Rachel snarled, racking another shell. Brandon grabbed her wrist before she could waste the 4th shot. The realization hit them both at once. Whatever dark magic kept these abominations moving, it wasn't anything bullets could stop.
Give it here,
Brandon hissed, fingers already glowing with the same eerie blue light that had reshaped a Mario coin into a star fragment back in that demon-infested warp zone. The transformation was faster this time. The shotgun's barrel split open like molten taffy, its components twisting, elongating, until a flamethrower nozzle spat sparks into the damp air. Yarnaby's stitches screamed when the fire hit. Real screaming, the kind that came from whatever human throats had been sewn into its construction. The creature's yarn body blackened instantly, threads curling like burning hair, stuffing igniting into a pyre of synthetic snow. Buttons popped like gunshots as the heat split them apart, and for one horrific second, Brandon saw faces beneath the yarn, dozens of them, mouths stretched wide in silent agony, before the whole monstrosity collapsed into a smoldering heap.
Come on, Rachel. We have to keep moving.
Brandon gasped, his fingers still tingling with the afterglow of the transformation. The stench of burning yarn and melted plastic clung to their clothes as they stumbled down the service shaft, their footsteps echoing in a rhythm that felt too loud, too alive in this corpse of a factory. The tunnel walls pulsed around them, not with heat, but with something worse, something aware, the metal groaning like an old man shifting in his sleep. Rachel's flashlight beam cut through the darkness ahead, then suddenly, nothing. The shaft ended in a jagged mouth of broken grating, and beyond it, a cavern so vast the light couldn't reach the other side. Brandon's stomach dropped as he realized they weren't looking at another factory level. They were staring into a city, a warped, miniature metropolis of tilted dollhouses and gutted toy stores, streets paved with cracked alphabet blocks, lampposts made from twisted Tinker toy rods. Somewhere in the distance, a broken Ferris wheel turned lazily, its cars dangling like hanged men.
That's got to be where the star piece is.
Rachel whispered, her voice hushed with something between awe and terror. The beam of her flashlight trembled as it traced the outline of a cathedral-sized dollhouse, its pink paint peeling away to reveal walls studded with teeth. Brandon didn't ask what kind of toys needed molars embedded in their architecture. He wasn't sure he wanted to know. Rachel's scream hadn't even finished echoing when the walls answered. The service shaft breathed, a slow metallic expansion and contraction that sent rust flakes showering down like dirty snow. Brandon whirled, pressing his back against Rachel's as the voice rolled over them again, each syllable vibrating through the metal under their feet.
Ash said you'd be coming.
The prototype wasn't behind them. It was the tunnel, the walls flexing inward with grotesque familiarity, panels sliding aside to reveal pulsing veins of blackened wiring that twitched like dying snakes. One massive eye, milky white and veined with ruptured capillaries, swiveled into view through a crack in the ceiling, its pupil dilating with a wet click as it focused on them. Rachel's boot skidded on something slick, not oil but saliva, as the entire shaft tilted downward, forcing them toward the gaping maw of the dollhouse city. The prototype's laughter followed, a sound like 1,000 dolls being disemboweled at once.
Welcome to the better place.
It boomed, the words warping as they traveled through the factory's rusted intestines.
My city beneath this cursed factory.
The prototype's laughter wasn't just sound, it was a vibration, crawling up Brandon's spine like spider legs made of broken glass. The milky eye blinked once, its lid scraping shut with the sound of a rusted garage door, and when it reopened, the tunnel walls split, not cracks, seams. The entire shaft unfolded around them like the world's most horrific pop-up book, panels peeling back to reveal the thing that had been watching them through the walls all along. The prototype wasn't just in the factory, it was the factory, its spindly limbs woven from corroded conveyor belts, its bulbous abdomen a sagging mass of fused plastic molds and tangled wiring. But the head, God, the head. A jester's cap stitched from stained plush flopped over one side of its face, the bells jingling with a sound that made Brandon's teeth ache. The other side was pure spider, 8 clustered eyes dripping black fluid, mandibles working behind a grinning mouthplate welded from old playground swing chains. Every movement sent tremors through the floor as its too many legs adjusted their grip, each one ending in a different nightmare. A claw from a carnival grabber machine here, a mangled doll hand there, even one that was just a rusted fire axe dragging sparks against the concrete. The prototype's laughter settled into a wet, clicking hum as its conveyor belt limbs gestured toward the miniature city below.
First stop, the nursery.
It rasped, voice vibrating through the rusted metal under Brandon's feet. The descent was sickening. Not stairs, but a slope of fused plastic dolls' arms, their tiny fingers interlaced into a grotesque staircase that squished underfoot. Rachel's grip on Brandon's wrist was the only thing stopping him from sliding into the abyss below. The nursery wasn't a building. It was a ribcage, huge, yellowed plastic ribs arching over a playground where a porcelain doll in a tattered pink dress pushed a rusted swing. The doll's face was cracked down the middle, one blue eye missing, but the other tracked them with unsettling precision.
Bobby.
The prototype crooned, its jester cap bells tinkling as it leaned down.
Say hello to our guest.
The porcelain doll's head rotated with a sound like grinding teeth.
They're pretty.
Poppy whispered, then giggled, a sound like shattered glass in a blender. Beside her, a judge's gavel slammed down with a crack that made Brandon flinch. The judge wasn't a doll, he was a marionette, his wooden limbs jerking on invisible strings, his painted eyes wide and unblinking.
Elliot Lewig.
The prototype said, tapping one sharpened finger against the marionette's bench.
Father always loved order.
The judge's mouth unhinged suddenly, vomiting a torrent of tiny, writhing alphabet blocks that spelled out guilty before scattering across the asphalt streets. Rachel's flashlight beam trembled as it traced the outlines of other toys moving in the shadows, a lion with a music box where its heart should be, a soldier with his stitches splitting to reveal sawdust intestines.
We were children.
The prototype murmured, its voice suddenly human soft, the spider legs on its face retracting for one vulnerable moment.
Orphans. Test subjects. The scientists called us spindly.
One of its conveyor belt limbs unspooled suddenly, revealing a patchwork of Polaroid photos fused into the rubber, children's faces, some smiling, some screaming, all sewn together with wire. Brandon's stomach lurched when he recognized Ash in one of the photos, her real face before the stitches, before the yarn. She was holding hands with a smaller girl.
Poppy.
He breathed. The prototype's milky eye swiveled toward him.
Sister always was his favorite.
It hissed, the jester cap's bells jingling wildly as its voice splintered into 3 different pitches at once.
Until she was.
The Polaroid of Ash and Poppy suddenly blackened at the edges, the image curling inward as if burning from within. Behind them, Poppy's rusted swing squealed as she kicked her legs higher, her porcelain face cracking wider with each arc.
Daddy says liars get stitched.
She sang, her voice ricocheting off the ribcage walls. The judge's gavel came down again, and this time Brandon saw the truth, the wooden. Mallet was a human femur wrapped in leather, the sound it made too wet, too organic. Elliot Ludwig's marionette strings weren't strings at all, but sinew, glistening in the dim light as they pulsed with something dark.
Rachel!
I hissed, tapping my thigh twice, our signal for now. Rachel didn't hesitate.
Sorry, Poppy.
She muttered, and the shotgun blast shattered the porcelain doll's head before the last syllable left her lips. Poppy's body toppled backward, her dress fluttering like a dying moth. And for one grotesque second, her remaining eye rolled toward me, wide and accusatory, before her body crumbled into ceramic dust. The prototype's roar shook the miniature city, sending alphabet blocks skittering across the asphalt like fleeing insects.
No! I'll unstitch you!
Its voice wasn't a sound anymore. It was a physical force, buckling the ribcage nursery around us, sending cracks spiderwebbing up the plastic bones overhead. We ran, our boots slipping on Poppy's scattered fragments, the shotgun's acrid smoke still clinging to Rachel's jacket. The building ahead pulsed, not with light but with something deeper, like a heartbeat behind reality. The door groaned under my grip, its surface slick with something between oil and saliva, and when it gave way, the air inside was stale and electric. The star piece hovered above a rusted operating table, its jagged edges casting fractured shadows that moved wrong, twisting like living things.
Well now,
A voice crackled, each word laced with static.
I see you have arrived.
The doctor wasn't a robot, not entirely. His torso was a mess of welded steel plates, but his arms were human, the skin stretched taut over too many joints, fingers ending in syringe tips. His face was the worst part. A CRT monitor bolted to his shoulders, the screen flickering with a pixelated grin that didn't sync with his voice.
Patient files indicate you're right on time.
He chuckled, adjusting a dial embedded in his chest. The star piece's glow dimmed as he stepped between us and it, his syringe fingers clicking together like scissor blades. Rachel didn't speak. She didn't need to. I felt her shift beside me, the way her breathing slowed, that pre-battle calm I'd learned to recognize. The doctor's screen flickered to a frowning face.
Dollhouses.
He tusked, wagging a needle finger.
No firearms in the operating theater.
His other hand twitched, and the star piece screamed, a high-pitched whine that sent us both to our knees, clutching our ears. The shadows it cast writhed violently, snapping at our ankles like starving dogs. The sword materialized in my hands with a blue-white flash. Not steel, but something sharper, colder, forged from the same star stuff that twisted worlds. The doctor barely had time to pivot before I cleaved through his monitor face, glass shattering in a burst of static and sparks. His laughter crackled through broken speakers as syringe fingers jabbed at my ribs, too slow. The second slash severed his right arm at the elbow, the limb hitting the floor with a wet thunk and twitching like a dying spider. Rachel lunged for the star piece just as the ceiling breathed. The entire building shuddered, not from impact, but like a living thing recoiling from pain, before the roof peeled back in a screech of buckling metal. The prototype's conveyor belt fingers curled through the gap, each segmented joint dripping molten plastic, as it gripped the rafters and pulled. The sword left my hand with a sound like a lightning strike, not steel cutting air, but reality itself unzipping. It punched through the prototype's pulsating core with a wet crunch, the blade buried to the hilt in the nest of fused wiring and throbbing plastic veins. For one suspended second, the factory held its breath. Then the blood came, not red, but black, thick as motor oil and stinking of burnt rubber, gushing in arcs from the wound like a ruptured hydraulic line. The prototype didn't scream, it unraveled. Its conveyor belt limbs spasmed, whipping through the air with enough force to shear a support beam in half. The jester cap slid sideways, bells jingling madly as its milky eye rolled back in its socket.
Sister was right.
It gargled, voice glitching like a dying tape recorder, before its torso split open with a sound like 1,000 zippers tearing at once. The collapse started there, in its chest cavity, the factory walls buckling inward as if the building itself was a dying lung. I didn't have time to watch. The star piece burned in my palm, its edges slicing into my skin as the floor tilted violently beneath us. Rachel grabbed my wrist as the ceiling rained down light fixtures and shredded plush.
Brendan!
She screamed, and I pushed, not with my hands, but with whatever part of me understood how to fold space between fingertips. The portal tore open with a sound like a mirror shattering in reverse, its edges flickering blue-white. We fell through just as the operating table imploded behind us. We landed hard on cracked asphalt 20 yards from the factory gates. Rachel's elbow jammed into my ribs as we rolled, the impact sending white-hot pains spiderwebbing across my vision. When I blinked it away, the sight that greeted us wasn't just a collapsing building. It was the earth itself opening. The factory's neon signs sputtered as the ground beneath it liquefied. The massive Playtime Co., letters tilting at a drunken angle before disappearing into the widening maw. Brick walls folded inward like wet cardboard, glass shattering in slow-motion cascades, as the sinkhole swallowed entire wings whole. A choked scream. Human, not animatronic, pierced the cacophony, and I saw Huggy Wuggy clinging to a collapsing fire escape, his blue fur singed black where flames licked up his limbs. His button eyes met mine for one horrifying second before the metal framework twisted like taffy, dragging him down into the darkness. Rachel's lips were chapped and tasted like gunpowder when she kissed me, but I didn't care. The third star piece burned between our palms where our hands met, its fractured edges slotting together with the other two in a silent click that vibrated up my arms. Behind us, the last screams of Playtime Co. faded into the hungry earth, swallowed by a sinkhole that smelled of melted plastic and childhoods cut short.
You're bleeding!
Rachel murmured against my mouth. She was right. My left sleeve was soaked through where the doctor's syringe fingers had grazed me, the fabric sticking to skin in a way that promised stitches later. I barely felt it. The star pieces pulsed in our joined hands, their light painting Rachel's face in shifting blues and whites, catching the flecks of gold in her eyes that only showed up when she thought we might actually win. A car alarm wailed 3 blocks over. The sound weirdly mundane after hours of animatronic shrieks. Somewhere beyond the chain-link fence surrounding the factory's corpse, a streetlight flickered on despite the midday sun. One of those small, wrong things that happened whenever we used the star pieces. Reality itself was wearing thin at the edges, like cheap fabric rubbed raw between fingers. We knew that we were getting closer to ending this nightmare for good.